Hey guys, it's Kyle, and I actually just got back from Florida, so this month will be a little bit different, but we'll review all the same solar data I normally do. And yeah, we'll go over the January activity, the February bill for consumers, and I did find some new solar data for this month, so I'll go over that, and then go over some system info as well. So definitely an interesting month this month. So like I said, I was able to find some solar data, and this was at the source of weather.gov GRR/solar data. So this is for Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's the area, and it gives you the percent of time the sun was out for each month, going back all the way to 1903. So it's awesome they provide that, and I did some averages, so just to make it easy. So, like I said, the month we're looking at is January of 2024, and the time the sun was out was only 8%, so very little. And just to give you guys a little frame of reference here, here's the averages. If you take the average for since 1903 for January in Grand Rapids, it's about 26% of the time the sun is out. This month in January is only 8%, so very little. And you guys know we had a huge snowstorm. If you live around this area, even if you don't, it took over half the east side of the United States, so you probably heard about it anyway. So anyway, what does that mean for this month's bill? It means it was not good, and not good at all. It was the worst performing month we've had all year. So definitely disappointing, and I'll get into the numbers here, but just so you guys can see, I'll zoom in a little bit. And if we look at the bill, I have to pay a total of $44.16. And actually, that's kind of what the average has been for what I've had to pay since getting solar panels. But that is really just due to the fact that we didn't use much didn't use much electricity at all. So if you look down, this is the graph of how many kilowatt hours I use per month. And February is right here, and they call it February, but it's once again, for January activity. It's a February bill, and I used only 197 kilowatt hours. So that's way below any other time I've had to use energy from the grid, and that's, like I said, because I was in Florida for a couple weeks, didn't have to draw any electricity. But once again, we had no sun, so that was part of it too. So just to go over it, we had 3 kilowatt hours that were sold back, so very, very little. And if we look at the in-phase data, what did we actually produce? So you can see on January 1st, we had 2 kilowatt hours. The second, we had another 2, so not much. For a total of 21 kilowatt hours produced by the solar panels for the entire month. And that is very little. And I'll get into what the averages actually are so far for the whole year, but definitely by far the lowest we've had. So it's all making sense when you look at the sun data. As usual, there's the system access fee of $8, distribution of $12.62. So those are like kind of the fees you're charged. So that those two together really create $20 of the bill, and I'm only being charged for 18 of actual electricity. So it ends up being more than electricity I used, which is once again one of the downsides of having consumers electricity. So yeah, that's really the main thing with that. And I did want to, just because we've got some questions on like what solar panels actually have. I will eventually make a video about all our system details. Until I get to that point, this is not my full-time job. I do have to work full-time. So this is just kind of for fun. But I do want to give some panel info. So what I was able to find was we have a 3.2 kilowatt hour system. Okay, so that really breaks down into 8 in-phase solar panels. And you might ask, what in-phase solar panels do you have? I still have to look into that. It was in 2023, it was the most up-to-date panel that in-phase made. So it's like the typical house panel size that was the most up-to-date for 2023. Wasn't able to find like what the make and model was other than that it was in-phase. So then, other than that, the parts that come with the solar panels are, of course, the inverters. And a lot of people have the choice to get either micro inverters or just one big inverter for the whole system. We have 8 IQ8 Plus micro inverters that were manufactured by United Renewable Energy, and our house is about 1,300 square feet. So this is just for a reference for those of you considering to get solar yourself. If you are, not trying to push it on anybody, but you know, if that is something you're interested in, this is obviously a good resource. So once again, the 8 IQ8 plus microinverters, you could choose to do one microinverter, or I'm sorry, one just total inverter. But the advantage of having microinverters is that anytime, let's just say a panel was to go down, which is very unlikely, hasn't happened yet, but then if one panel is go down, you still have other microinverters that can actually generate the electricity. If you have one inverter and it goes down, you're not going to get any energy. So having 8 separate ones allows you to at least get energy if a panel does in fact go down. So that's the advantage for that. They are a little bit more expensive though. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we talked about that, wanted to just, you know, glance over at last month's bill. So that this bill over here from last month, it was $61. That's because we, you know, we're here the whole time. We used 321 kilowatt hours last month and didn't, you know, only generated, or actually only sold back 35. So this, I thought that would be the worst month, but this month, the one we're talking about right now for February's bill, was by far the worst in generation. And simply just because the sun wasn't out and there was so much snow. So when we break that down, this is kind of a little section over here where I break it down. I'll zoom out a little bit to make it easier. So in-phase data for this month, telling us what we actually generated was 21 kilowatt hours. We have the self-generated outflow on the bill, so that's the amount we actually sold back, right? So that was only 3, very low. And that gives us a total used while producing of 18 kilowatt hours. We were charged, what we actually drew from the system was 197. So if you add in the total that I used while producing, we would have been billed for 215. Okay, so that really gives us, you know, if you go back to my handy chart up here, you can kind of see how much you would expect to pay. That gives us an expected bill of $47, assuming we did not have solar panels. And the current bill is for $44. So if you calculate it that way, we really only saved $3 this month. And you know, that's obviously nothing. And it should be a lot more when you get all the credits you gain from the summer and you get to take those into account. Once again, we have not been able to do that since our system was installed late in the summer. So I'm looking forward to next year at this time, get to use some of those credits we earned in the summer. But anyway, we ended up paying an extra of $83 because when you take into account that we still have a loan for solar panels, which is 86, you subtract the 3 out of there, we paid an extra of $83 to have the solar panel. So it was not a benefit this month, especially, you know, January, all snow, roof is covered. You can imagine it's not going to be a benefit unless you have some credits saved up. So I did want to go through one last item here for this month because I did get some questions from last month's video. So I did download all the data from our solar system year to date. So it really didn't start until July 26, okay? And I broke down the amount of kilowatt hours we had per day all the way from July 26, just to give us an average. And if you look down here, so the first column B here, these are just watt hours. You multiply, or I'm sorry, divide it by 1,000, you get to kilowatt hours, which is what you're billed in. It's just easier unit to talk about. And so the total that we produced since having the solar panels was 1,364 kilowatt hours. So it breaks down to about an average per day of 7, which ideally, when you have a 3.2 kilowatt hour system, you're really only hoping to get, I think last I looked, it was about 12 kilowatt hours per week. So that should definitely, you know, this is doing pretty well for the small system that we have. And then the average per month is about 210 kilowatt hours. So still not a lot. And then one of the questions that I got last month was how many kilowatt hours, how big of a system would you need to actually get 10 kilowatt hours per day in the winter in West Michigan. So that's a tough question to answer. Definitely depends on where you live. But to answer that, I tried, I broke down some of the information. The average per day in kilowatt hours from December to January is 2.2 kilowatt hours. So to get that to be around 10, then you'd have to multiply the amount that I have right now by about 5. So I have 8 solar panels right now. You multiply that by 5. I think that ends up being about 40 solar panels, which would be, in my opinion, a ridiculous amount. Just because I wouldn't be able to afford that personally. Doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't, but it is quite a bit. So it's not something I would ever want to do, but we have a small house and we're happy with the 8 that we have, even though it doesn't necessarily meet all our needs in the winter. So far, it should cover at least 85-90% of our electricity once we get all those summer months and some more normal data into the whole year. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Once again, this month was not great. Probably will be the worst month. I said that last month, but this one actually will be. February, just for fun, has already outperformed January in the first 2 days. So the first 2 days of February, we had like 12 kilowatt hours per day. So we already were looking at 24 kilowatt hours produced in the first 2 days of February, whereas January didn't even get to that the whole month. So definitely interesting, but that's just how it goes. Yeah, just want to report the honest facts. You don't always have a good month. But yeah, once again, hoping that the next month's coming up will be a lot better. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know as always. And yeah, I really appreciate you listening.